When I first came to Singapore, I think my biggest impression that kind of impressed me a lot was the choices of food. So I find it fascinating talking to drivers from Grab, like taxi drivers or Grab drivers. You've always open up a small chat and they'll talk to you back more about COE, about their life here, about the rental market. I came to Singapore mainly because of my husband's job. He works in finance and as a quantitative engineer in a trading firm in Singapore, and we came from Ireland to Singapore about 2 years ago. We stayed in Dublin for the past 10 years before we came to Singapore. So Ireland was basically our home for the past 10 years. And yeah, it was a very interesting change, moving from Dublin to Singapore, from extreme cold weather to an extreme tropical weather. It was quite fun and I'd say interesting experience in a lot of ways. When I first came to Singapore, I think my biggest impression that kind of impressed me a lot was the choices of food they have here. I remember we were still in quarantine in a hotel. When we moved down to Singapore, there was still like a restrictive of 10 days of quarantine in the hotel. So we had to order food. And then I remember I picked up my phone and opened up an app called Food Panda, and then I opened it. And there was like a wild collection of food that I can choose, from Asian flavor to Chinese to Japanese and the bakeries. It's just amazing. It's overwhelming to me coming from Dublin. Because back in Dublin, it was not that easy to have delivery food all the time and compare with Singapore. Most of the people in Ireland, we cook for ourselves for dinner. And occasionally we went out for a dining or like a fine dining or in a restaurant, but it was like occasional. It's not like a daily scenario. But coming to Singapore, you saw so many overwhelming choices of food, and I think that was the first thing that really hit me to have the impression about Singapore. I was like, wow, it's quite flavory. I suppose like Dublin was much smaller, and people in Dublin, we pretty much have a small town vibe. I lived in an area where it's all residential, terrace houses, and people being there 30, 40 years. And I moved down to the neighborhood. I stayed there for 10 years without changing the location. So there was a very small town vibe. Everybody went to the same parish church as Catholic. I'm a Buddhist, so I don't went to church a lot, but we still mingled in, and you basically knew everybody there. And if you've got trouble, they came to help you, and people are watching your garden for you and watching out for your cars. And when you're on holiday, they might just call you to make sure that you're safe. So it was very different. And then compared with that, I think Singapore is a very cosmopolitan and developed country and a city-state. Everything's been much more like on a grander scale for me. You've got shopping malls like on Orchard Road. You've got like multiple shopping malls everywhere, and then it's so convenient traveling with Grab. And but in then another way, people seem to talk less as much as what Dublin people would do. But also Singaporeans are very, very nice. I found it very interesting talking to the drivers, because that's probably the only time that I feel similar like when I was living in Dublin, that you could talk to people and they told you about their feelings of living in the city. So I found it fascinating talking to drivers from Grab, like taxi drivers or Grab drivers. You've always opened up a small chat, and they'll talk to you back more about COE, about their life here, about the rental market or the property price, and that was fun. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that Dublin is a monocultural society. My husband works and was welcome and taken in as an immigrant in Dublin when we first came there, and he worked in the technology industry where people are basically coming from everywhere. So first of all, I don't think Dublin as a city is a very monocultural place. But Ireland in general, yes, 70-80% of the people there are Irish, local Irish, but they're also very, very nice and kind and inclusive. So for me, I didn't find it too much of a hassle trying to blend in the society, as long as I was willing to open up myself and talking to people, making human connections. That was fairly easy for me. Well, Singapore is a very interesting place because I am a Chinese Irish. I hold the Irish passport, but in the meantime, I was born and raised up in China. So I speak both English and Chinese. And of course, people saw me as Chinese in Singapore, and it was fairly easy for them to talk to me in Mandarin with their very cute Singaporean accent. And it was easy. Like, I didn't have any problems blending in, supposedly, in here, because they've got this English part of the society, but they also have their Chinese part. So as a Chinese ethnic, it was fairly easy. People talk to you, and people from other cultural backgrounds, they're willing to talk to you as well, and took you in as part of the society fairly quickly. So yeah, it was a very different feeling, but Singapore, it was very easy for me. It was a very easy city, I have to say. Well, I suppose I'm a very lucky person that I've always been surrounded with interesting people who come from all kinds of cultural backgrounds. My husband works in trading firm, and he has loads of French colleagues and Chinese colleagues or Korean colleagues as well. And it was actually fascinating because we didn't have a lot of chance to make friends with French people. But coming to Singapore, we started to kind of mingle in with French people here and found it really interesting. And we would be introduced to more wine collections. Of course, they are experts. Any French people you picked up from his firm maybe can tell you one or two possible lovely wine. And I tried it. It was really, really good as well. And my daughter is attending the German European school, so we've also got people who came from the mainland Europe, continental Europe, and from Switzerland, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands. So we basically had friends almost from every part of the mainland Europe, which was also very different from the Irish life that we had before. So it was interesting because we were lucky that we are always surrounded with interesting people in Singapore. So we got a chance to make connections with people from multicultural environments, and I found it fascinating. And that was actually probably the most attractive part for me, to be able to have this exposure, knowledge, and fun in Singapore. Yeah, for the moment, I think we are quite happy here. My husband cannot complain about his job, and he's not planning to moving anywhere else. Of course, yeah, there are times that I'm missing Ireland madly. My daughter as well, because she grew up there. So we would miss the greenery in Ireland, our own friends, and we miss Dublin and a different atmosphere as well. But for the moment, yes, we are staying in Singapore, and we're quite happy. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. suppose like I said before, that I've always been surrounded with interesting people around me in Singapore, and that was actually one of the triggering points that made me want to do this channel, because of course there are interesting people there and I want to feature their stories. And also coming from Ireland and living between Asia and Europe for the past 10 years, it gave me a whole another different level of experiences, and also a multicultural identity, I suppose, as well. So I also want to actually show to more people that it works. We are living most of the time in a global city. Like you could be living in Singapore for one day and then in New York another day, or back to London the third day. So most of the people are exposed to a very multicultural and a global environment. So I think it's important that we are willing to make connections with people coming from different cultural backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds as well. And we are willing to make an effort to understand each other from our hearts. And that's what I'm trying to do. And on that regard, I think Singapore has done a fantastic job trying to create a very inclusive and diversified society, welcoming people from all kinds of cultural, ethnic backgrounds, and who are willing to make a contribution to the society here. And surprisingly, it works perfectly here. So I want to dig out why through talking to different people coming from different backgrounds, and then trying to understand how does that work for them as well as for me. I think my primal hope would be just be able to talk to more people coming from different backgrounds, and that's the initial aim for me. And then possibly if it can reach a bigger crowds of audience, and being able to gain some feedback from them to see how they are reacting to the content of my channel would be also interesting. But yeah, I think that's it. I'm just interested in people and their own culture and their stories. So just to be able to gain more would be the I think the most important thing at the moment.